quickly pull two things out of the book for you to put this moment in context. Because I think the point of the book is that we're living through this gigantic change, and a very exciting one. So back in May of 2009, the British newspaper The Telegraph began publishing the unexpurgated expense records of all the members of the British Parliament, which were leaked to it by a guy named John Wick, who was a former SAS officer who actually had gotten these records from an anonymous source. And we don't know who that person was. It's never been revealed, but it's believed that the source was someone who was working, who was part of the House of Commons staff, and he was part of a team that was busily censoring the records prior to their release. They had been sought for years under Freedom of Information requests from a journalist named Heather Brooke. And as she writes in her book, The Silent State, some of the staff on this redaction team were so disgusted by what they saw and by the lies being told about the delays that they made a copy of the data, and a mole inside the redaction room made a copy of that and later passed it on to John Wick. Wick says that he was also told that the critical information was being removed from the files that would prevent many of the expense scandals from ever being revealed. And he said, quote, "The ultimate source of this leak was adamant that the key thing was that both the information and the way in which it was being handled should be in the public domain, and that its release was in the public interest." Wick himself told the press he was personally dismayed by how much information the government was collecting on the public and how poorly it managed to keep that information private. We've reached the stage in society where they want to know everything about us. I think we're entitled to know about them. So he leaked this information to The Telegraph started publishing it, and the rest is history. I mean, it was a huge scandal in England. It led to the resignation of the Speaker of the House of Commons. It led to a number of members resigning or being indicted, and it totally turned British politics upside down. So, thought experiment. What if the British government had said to The Telegraph that you shouldn't publish those records because they were stolen? And these are stolen government documents. Okay? Just hold that thought in your head for a second. I want to tell you another story from the book. One of the people who you probably haven't heard of, but I think of him as a data transparency revolutionary, who I was lucky to meet last spring in Vienna, a guy named Marco Raycar. He's the founder of a blog. Hey, Greg. Just in time. So Marco Raycar is the founder of a blog in Croatia called Politica. And when I met him in May last year, he had been arrested just a month earlier and interrogated by the police and then released after being held for several hours on suspicion that he had posted online a secret list of more than 500,000 veterans of the Balkan War in Croatia in 1991 and 1995. And the publication of this list created a huge uproar in Croatia because it turns out that when the war ended in 1994, there were actually only about 325,000 people who had actually served. And by 2009, somehow, the number of registered veterans receiving benefits, things like cheaper mortgages, the ability to import cars without tariffs, and so on, had blossomed to more than 500,000. And this searchable database... Well, Croatia is an interesting place, which the voter roll thing will come up in a second. And so, Marco was arrested on suspicion because they had a feeling that he might be the guy who had done this. And to this day, he denies that he was the person who posted this database, which, by the way, was on an American server, so the Croatian government couldn't shut it down. And they never found any evidence on his computers that he had done it, though he's the kind of guy who, when you ask him, so nobody really knows how these files were leaked, he'll look at you with a twinkle in his eye and he'll say, well, no, they were on CDs. So, but it's understandable why the police suspected him, because a year earlier his website had done another data hack. And this time someone had leaked to them the voter roll for Croatia. Croatia has this interesting situation where there are more registered voters in Croatia than there are adults. And this is partly a relic of being part of the former Yugoslavia, but it's also a sign of very serious corruption. And so what Marco did when he got this database is he made it searchable so that you could search by town and look up addresses. And he discovered there were towns where, for example, there would be an address like Jusina 0, like 0 Broadway, and there'd be 400 people registered to vote in this town, at that address, a non-existent address. And by posting this information onto that database and making it searchable, he actually created, again, a firestorm of scandal, and in this case, a push to change the Constitution so that you can no longer, if you are a Croatian citizen, be registered to vote in more than one country. I know it sounds funny. So the Veterans database, which had millions of hits, was on a server in the United States. So what if the United States government had, at the time, let's say Croatia was a more important ally than it is, had said to Amazon, let's say, that was hosting the server, that's stolen information, and what are you doing hosting stolen information? So I raised these two points for you, both because, first, I want to just make the point that the movement for transparency is global. And its effects are often extremely important. And that WikiLeaks should not be seen as this outlier, even though it is an outlier. And Julian Assange is not the best poster child for the movement for transparency. But the challenge that we have is what happens when unpopular speech, but necessary speech, is intimidated or suppressed. So the reason that I guess at the end that I had the energy to do this book is that what I saw happen with WikiLeaks after the State Department cables started to be published and various government players were shrieking about not just assassinating Assange and so on, but leaning on companies like Amazon and PayPal and MasterCard and Visa and successfully intimidating them through extra-legal ways to kick WikiLeaks off their servers and stop providing services to them. No court case, no criminal charges, no conviction, nothing. And so even if it's a hard case for us, right, this is not easy transparency. This is not like publishing what the government spends. It's publishing uncomfortable stuff and doing it in messy ways. But I think it's important for those of us who work in this space to realize that we have to be really concerned about what happened in relation to Amazon and all these other companies caving in too quickly. And I don't think we've had enough. We've done enough. I don't quite know what we should do. But that's the nice thing about writing a book is you don't have to have all the answers. But I also wrote this because I wanted to make sure that we realize what we cannot take this for granted. It's a really amazing time to be working in this space, but we can't take it for granted. The internet as an open and free space is really tenuous. And we have to think hard about all the things we can do to shore it up and strengthen it and ensure that even speech that is unpopular and controversial, that there's space for it. It's the most vital speech we have to protect. So thank you. I hope you enjoy the book. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Joni, and Ellen, and Richard for all your support, everybody at Sunlight. Thank you.
Thank you.